Welcome back, Irish fans, to Breaking Down Braves Boys podcast. Today, finally got some news to go over. A little late because I was at church camp and was actually in church when the news broke, but glad to be here now talking about it. Notre Dame's landed its first commitment since December with Paul Atkinson. I guess Alex Wade was probably a little later, but big land for Notre Dame. Even though the rankings won't show it as much, but Irish staff landed Campbell, Middlesex Magic forward, who really burst onto the scene this summer. Top 150 player, should be ranked by everybody, but since he just came onto the scene recently and he's not playing in Peach Jam or anything, I think he's a little low. But over the course of the year, he should be ranked by everybody. I'll go over his rankings in a minute, but Notre Dame came onto this one pretty quick. They handled the recruitment really well, in my opinion. Offered a few months ago, I think June, and we're the first high major to offer. Eventually, over probably a little over 10 other schools that are high major got involved, including like Illinois, Oklahoma, who he also took an official visit to, Stanford, who he took an official visit to. But Notre Dame was also one of the schools, and I guess they blew him away enough on that visit that they ended up landing him. Notre Dame took him as their only official visitor in June. I guess they knew he was committing early, which was smart. Went and watched him multiple times, got him on campus early. Just a really nice job by Bray and especially Ryan Humphrey, along with the rest of the staff. But Humphrey, I think, was one of the main factors in Campbell's decision and the way Notre Dame handled it, especially them being really early on the scene. But I want to go over Campbell a little bit. After, just wanted to touch on his recruitment a little more. A couple other big schools, like I mentioned. But yeah, Notre Dame has really kind of pushed back who they want on campus to around September and a little beyond that for football games. But Campbell, I guess, was different just because they thought he could pop early, and he did. So really smart by the staff. Glad they ended up getting him on campus. And I guess that made him feel important too, because if he's your only official visitor for the whole month outside of Blake Wesley and JR, who you don't have to do any recruiting pitches to, they're already signed, what's going to happen on those visits? Campbell is basically the only guy that Notre Dame's going after outside of J.J. Starling on two officials. I mean, they're going after other guys, but they're not actively trying to get him on campus like that. So that's really important. To Campbell's story is just how Notre Dame staff handled it. I'm sure the Middlesex Magic connection, former AAU team of Cormac Ryan and Pat Connaughton, I'm sure that played a role just with getting tipped off early on him, and that definitely helped. Notre Dame offered, then South Carolina offered, then a few other schools in the next 3 or 4 hours offered. So huge win by the staff there, even if it's not a huge ranking guy. But I guess I'll move into the rankings. Nice transition. He's a 3-star on 24/7, ranked 132nd nationally, unranked on the composite, unranked by rivals. And I couldn't find his ESPN 150 ranking, but when they released it a few weeks ago, I remember him being in it. So there's that. Rivals and the composite don't have him ranked, though. I think by the end of the summer, he probably will be. It's just a thing that he didn't have a whole lot of exposure until this summer. Nobody really knew his name outside of mid-majors. Just kind of came out of the scene then. So his ranking should definitely improve. He also reclassed, so I'm sure he wasn't getting as much interest as he wanted, probably because of COVID, because he lives in Maine, plays AAU in Massachusetts. Didn't have a whole lot of exposure last summer, reclassed, and I'll touch on that a little more later, but just kind of came onto this scene recently. So his rankings should improve when more evaluators get out to see him. To me, this is good for Notre Dame. It's one of those under-the-radar guys that Notre Dame has always seemed to get during the Bray era, and they turn into really good players. A guy like Bonzi, Martin Gebbin, I think, was really underrated coming out of high school or coming into college. But to me, this is a prototypical Notre Dame type guy that they get. Seems like that personality-wise also, I think he'd be a nice fit with them. But I guess I'll move on to his skill set. We're not talking about his personality right now. the thing that's most appealing about him to me is he's an inside-out big who can catch and shoot, bang down low, work out of the pick and roll. And in back-to-basket situations, he really thrives. Has nice touch around the rim, which other guys that Notre Dame's landed in the past have kind of struggled with in high school. But Campbell has a really nice feel around the rim, can score in bunches outside or inside. There's an AAU game I watched. I think he had 10 points in the first 7 minutes, and I barely even noticed just because it's so casual. Really lets the game come to him, and when the game coming to him involves him taking over early, then that's great for him. He's a guy who can quietly put up 20 and 10. I feel like has some physicality and some tenacity down low that Notre Dame's really needed as of late, and I'm sure that's one of the big reasons why they went after him. Now, all three of the bigs after Leshewski graduates will be guys who have some nice physicality and toughness down low in Zona, Taylor, and Campbell. And I wanted to say I think Campbell at this age is a better prospect than Zona or Taylor were, just because I think he's more polished offensively than both of them. Moves a little bit better than Zona, a little more athletic, even though he's not going to play above the rim. And he's not a freak athlete by any means. I just think puts himself in really good spots, has a really nice touch around the rim, and has the same kind of physicality those guys have. I think Taylor's a lot more athletic, but Campbell is a little more versatile down low, fills more needs, and I think he's a better scorer than Taylor is, and I think he can really hold his own rebounding, especially with the way he puts himself in spots. That's another thing I really like about him. Really good basketball IQ. Is a really good off-ball screener. I think that's mostly system, but that experience can definitely help him in Notre Dame in a kind of free-flowing offense. I think he could be a really nice fit there. Just puts himself in great spots, kind of makes up for if he has an athletic disadvantage, which he doesn't have many at this point in his development, just because he's playing not as great. He's not playing on Peach Jam or anything. He is playing against some good teams. He played against J.J. Starling a few weeks ago, but I think he fills a lot of needs down low. Physicality, scoring, toughness, basketball IQ, just does a lot of things well. He's not going to blow you away when you watch his games. I think he has with some people, but to me, he hasn't blown me away. Rankings-wise, I guess he hasn't blown you away either, but this is a guy that's going to come in, he's going to develop, and he's going to provide some stuff Notre Dame has really needed lately. I think this is a bigger get than the rankings will tell you, just because of the needs it fills with Notre Dame and the kind of contrast you can get to some of the other bigs Notre Dame's had. Really like everything about this. So I guess I'll get into kind of the fit, kind of how I see him, because I mentioned fit briefly earlier. Offensively, I like him better at the 5, but he can also stretch the floor. So he can play the 4 well and the 4 out, 1 in. I just think Bray wants to downshift a little more after the trouble they had with Mooney and Durham on the court at the same time. I think he's a bit undersized defensively to play at the 5, at only 6'8", but he is physical enough to not get back down easily like some of Notre Dame's other bigs have recently. But I think realistically you'll see him at the 4 and the 5 in college, most likely. I'd say as an underclassman, the 4, and then as he kind of grows into his body more, learns how to switch on to guards a little more, he'll probably play the 5. It just depends on matchups early on, I think. But that is one thing that I wanted to touch on. I think he's got to get a little bit leaner, but what high schooler who's a big man like that doesn't have to get leaner? I don't think he moves super well, but he does move better than, say, like Zona or maybe even Gavin coming out of high school. That's kind of the reason I don't like the Bonzi comparison so much. I think he can score in bunches like Bonzi can. I don't think he's as versatile as Bonzi is, and I don't think he moves as well as Bonzi. But also, the thing with Bonzi is I didn't see him in high school because I was really young when he was in high school. So I guess maybe in high school they were similar players, but the guy I saw at Notre Dame in the last few years, I don't know if I love the comparison. I think he's more of a mix of Bonzi and Mooney, just with the way he puts himself in spots and can play below the rim and do it effectively. I think I like that comparison a little more. If it's kind of a mix, I don't know if he's necessarily Bonzi Colson. Really hard to live up to that expectation. I don't know if we should really put that on him yet, but Um, there is definitely some things that he does that Bonzi's done also. Um, Going into his role, I think with the current roster construction, he can come in and be a third big behind Zona and Taylor as a freshman. I expect a transfer that year because Zona is their tallest guy at 6'9", maybe 6'10" by now, but when he came in, he was 6'9". And I think it's possible he earns a rotation spot as an underclassman, even if they do get a transfer. But he seems like the guy Notre Dame gets, and they're under the radar. Then they develop, they stay old, and they become really good college players, and some of them even NBA players. If he's as good as Bonzi, he's an NBA player. Especially because he reclassed, he can be a heck of a college player as a senior. Um, so yeah, that's what I see. I think he's Notre Dame's bigs. I think it's pretty well known. Don't do much until upperclassmen years, but Campbell is a guy who I think could come in and play just because of the roster construction Notre Dame does have. Going into what it says about Notre Dame recruiting in general, big picture, doesn't say a whole lot to me. I think it's a guy they've kind of always got, especially since they have the Middlesex Magic connection. Campbell's the type of guy they've never had trouble getting, but it's also not the kind of guy that they've struggled to develop. A lot of guys like him have become really good players in Notre Dame, but he's not your flashy top 150 guy. This isn't one of those things where it's like, wow, Bray's back. Bray really got this guy. I think if he gets a J.J. Starling, maybe even a Cam Whitmore, if they can get a guy like that, then I think we can start talking like that. But getting a top 150 guy who's not top 150 in some places, by all means he should be. But I think I need to see a little more from Bray and the staff to be convinced that, dang, they're really recruiting like they were in 2018, or dang, they got another guy like Demetrius Jackson. Campbell, I think, is a guy who could average maybe at his ceiling 14, 15 points a game, a guy who could put up similar stats to John Mooney in his last year, maybe without the rebounding. But I think in terms of recruiting, I need to see a little more. But this is a really nice start to this class. They needed to get a guy to start it off, kind of build some momentum. And now they're going after big fish also to complement him, going after J.J. Starling, Rodney Rice, and then those other point guards they offered, Jameel Brown, Cam Whitmore. A lot of guys still on the board that Notre Dame could really make a push for. And having a guy finally commit is great for them. I think if they can land my dream class of the guys they're still, I guess you'd say, prioritizing would be Dom, and then probably JJ, maybe even Jameel Brown. So then you got a shooter, a point guard, and a big. They don't really have any offers out that are realistic to guys who can play the five, that are like near 7 foot. But right now, I really like Dom Campbell. Love what he's bringing to the team, and I love his versatility down low. A lot to like here, and he can be a nice compliment to other guys, especially with his feel for the game, the way he lets things come to him, and he can set up his guards well. Just love everything about this. So thank you guys for watching. Hopefully I'll be back with the guys soon. This was kind of spur of the moment. I had to get a video out. Just wanted to get my thoughts on Notre Dame finally landing a commitment. So thank you guys for watching. Go Irish, and peace.